Hi, my name is Chaim Sunitsky, and my parental given birth name, if you want to call it that way, was Mikhail in Russian, Sunitsky. And I used to be in love with mathematics from probably grade 4 or even before that. I used to be part of various math Olympiads, and I, of course, read the most well-known Russian magazine for kids and for students called Quantum. They used to try to make this type of magazine in English too for a while. Maybe when I was in high school they tried to bring this to America, but it didn't really work too well. But the Quantum magazine in Russian, was going on for decades. By the way, I recently found out interesting information that the chief editor, who happened to be Jewish, in Soviet Union at that time, those Jews who kept the commandments or were interested in Judaism generally hid that, because that was very dangerous and was generally against the law, at least if not officially, but certainly these people were persecuted. So it turned out that the chief editor of that magazine for years, Kikoin, he was one of the great physicists in Russia, turned out that he actually used to learn the Parsha, the weekly Torah reading, with Rashi and Ramban. That was very surprising to me, with the commentators with which we learn. So he actually got a Jewish education and was, to the extent possible in Soviet Union, interested in Judaism, which to me was a very big surprise. Of course, none of this is mentioned in Quant magazine. But at any rate, what I want to show you is a couple of examples of questions that they used to ask for what is called Quantum for little children, which I think is amazing. It's really great that, like some of these questions supposedly are submitted from a third grader. But these are difficult questions. So this is a type of picture that, by the way, they have really interesting sections here. They have what's called Quantum is Smiling, and that's about jokes in mathematics. And they have a section where they were, for a while, analyzing Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and asking all kinds of questions on physics and sometimes math on it. Of course, it's known that Lewis Carroll himself was a mathematician. His other works, besides this book for his niece, his other works were generally on mathematics, which surprised the Queen of England. So I want to show you an example. This is a physics question. Even though it's presented for little children, I think even for us to answer it, this is somewhat challenging. Just to give you a sense of what Russia used to be like. And then I'll give you a couple of examples of my own questions that are really a paraphrase of similar questions here and in America by Martin Gardner and by other similar, like the equivalent of the people who did Quant magazine in Russia would be Martin Gardner and a few other people similar to him here who would present interesting problems and funny paradoxes. So here's a question that I just read, a random question that I just read in one of these Quant for little children. It says that two children brought ice cream, and one put it on a table and one put it on a ventilator, on a fan. So which one will melt faster? Think about it for a second. I think the answer is that the one that's near the fan will melt faster. Why do I think so? Because the hot air is constantly blown to it. So whatever air near the ice cream doesn't have time to cool down and therefore to melt the ice cream slower. Meaning if the ice cream is standing on the table, the air right near ice cream gets cooler and the circulation of air is not really significant. Therefore, it's like a layer of air right near ice cream that will basically keep it cold for a while at least. But if you have air blowing all the time, then there's no time for any hot air to get cooler and therefore to cool the ice cream slower. So I think that the ice cream that was put on the fan therefore will melt faster. By the way, similar phenomenon, why do we feel on a cold day, we feel colder when there is wind? For the same reason, but the opposite. Our body is hotter than the temperature around us. So if there is wind, we don't have time to warm up the air around us. If there is no wind, then the air around the face and other exposed parts of the body kind of warms up a little, and therefore a person doesn't feel as cold. Here is another question here, the last question. This is, by the way, from 1987, sorry, this particular volume. I have a lot of these volumes at home, which were brought from Russia. So the question is, can a power of 2 have exactly the same number of zeros, ones, twos, threes, etc., nines? Think about it. Is there a way? Your hunch probably should be that it's impossible, but how do you prove it? How is it possible to prove that a power of 2, 2 to some nth power, cannot have, let's say, 55 ones, 55 twos, 55 threes? So to me, it occurs an easy proof that it cannot be, because such a number would be divisible by 9. Right? The sum of its digits, if it has n ones, n twos, n threes, etc., n nines, and n zeros, that would be n times the sum from 1 to 9, and sum from 1 to 9 is divisible by 9. And we know any number divisible by 9 is if and only if its sum of digits is divisible by 9. So therefore, since power of 2 cannot possibly be divisible by 9 or by 3, so we know it cannot be that the power of 2 has the same number of every digit. So these are just examples of things that kids were supposed to solve. So I think it's amazing what the Russian level at that time, at least, I don't know how it is today. I left Russia when I was 14, but it was still Soviet Union then. But I think it's amazing that these types of questions were asked to children. So now I'll give you a couple of examples of questions that I paraphrased from American educators of similar kind. So here's one question. I made it a little bit sound more Jewish, but really, obviously, a similar question is asked without any Jewish attributes. So, Jewish people wear tefillin on top of their head, a certain black box that tells us that we believe in God who took us out of Egypt. So, these boxes we put on in the morning during prayer. My question is that how is it possible that I can stick out my tongue and touch tefillin? Touch the tefillin of the head. So the answer to this is that I never said that I'll touch the tefillin of the head with my tongue. I can stick out my tongue and touch my tefillin with my head. So this is just one funny example that you could tell to friends. I'll give you one more example. There's lots like that, and you could find most of this now in internet or buy relatively cheaply, Martin Gardner's books. And this example, by the way, is not from a Martin Gardner book, but from a different book. So there's a person who either says only falsehood, never says the truth at all, and that's on weekdays, but on Shabbat, he considers Shabbat so holy, he cannot lie on Shabbat. So on Shabbat, he says only the truth. Who lies on weekdays, says truth on Shabbat. So the question is, on which day would such a person be able to say, I lied yesterday, and I will lie tomorrow? The answer is that there are 3 days when he could say that. He could say that on Friday, because it's not true, and on Friday he lies. He could say that on Sunday, because again, it's not true, and on Sunday he lies. And he could say that on Shabbos, he could say that on Saturday, because on Saturday he actually tells the truth, and that would be true, because he does lie on Friday and Sunday. All other days of the week he cannot say it. If he would say that on Wednesday, let's say, that would be true, because he did lie yesterday and will lie tomorrow. That would be true. And he cannot say truth on any other day except Shabbat. So therefore, he cannot say this statement on any other day. How about when can he say, I was truthful yesterday and I'll be truthful tomorrow? So he could say this on any weekday, because this is false. The one day when he cannot say this is Shabbat, because then it would be false, and on Shabbat he cannot say anything false. And I have lots of similar questions also, and on my other video I will bring many of these type of tricky questions, including the ones that are directly related to Torah and the ones that are just general questions that are not really directly related to Judaism at all. And please press like if you like this video, or leave your comments if you didn't.